Videocards.com is citing their own internal sources at AIBs, saying that the AIB manufacturers have access to NVIDIA's RTX 50 Super GPUs, but have been told not to proceed with launching them yet because of the 3GB module pricing. We've got lots of other news stories to talk about today as well, but let's start with this. So apparently the 3GB modules cost up to 3 times more than the 2GB modules. Each 3GB module costs between $60 to $70, whereas the 2GB modules are around $20. So while you get a 50% VRAM increase by slotting in the 3GB modules instead of the 2GB modules, which is the main selling point of the super cards according to the leaked specs, it means you're spending a lot more, dollars per gigabyte of VRAM, and would probably make these GPUs have to cost a lot more to the end user if they launched them right now. Apparently that's also the holdup on the 5050 9GB version that I've covered in leaks and rumors previously on the channel. So basically it looks like they're kind of ready to go on the 5080 Super, the 5070 Ti Super, the 5070 Super, and the 5050 9GB, but just due to those 3GB module pricing, they are unable to actually go ahead with the launch because the prices would be untenable. Remember that these cards are basically just more VRAM, 50% increase by switching to those 3GB modules instead of 2GB modules, so your 5080 and your 5070 Ti would move from 16GB up to 24 gigabytes. They would also have a power increase, which means they could probably do a bit of a performance increase by upping the power limits out of the box and maybe getting, a 5% overclock or something like that to distinguish them a little more than just the VRAM capacity. The 5070 is slightly more interesting in that regard, in that it is reported to go from 6,144 CUDA cores to 6,400, so small actual core bump in addition to the 50% VRAM bump going from 12 to 18. A little bit more power there as well, but not as big of a power bump. So maybe there you're getting most of the extra performance, if there is any, from the additional cores, whereas there's a little more headroom to play with the power targets on the 5070 Ti going from 300 to 350, and the 5080 reportedly going from 360 to 415. Remember, the 5050 9GB version is a more significant change. It has the same core count, but would be going down from a 128-bit bus to a 96-bit bus, which normally would lower performance, but it would be moving from GDDR6 to GDDR7, which would actually probably slightly increase the memory bandwidth rather than decrease it despite the smaller bus, and you get that 1 extra gigabyte of VRAM, which is like, okay, that's not much, but at the same time, if a game is just barely using over 8, having that 1 extra gigabyte of VRAM would be nice, but again, this is only if it came in at the same or less pricing, so that would be why these wouldn't be ready to actually hit a launch at this point. My other concern, not so much on the 9GB 5050, but on the other cards, especially these cards moving up to 24 gigabytes of VRAM, is that the AI market, people running their own local AI models and things like that, might end up buying those up and competing with the gaming sales. So even if these did end up launching at a reasonable-ish MSRP, maybe at the same MSRP, but now you get more VRAM, something like that, I would have my doubts, I guess, on the what kind of pricing the end consumer would actually see on the market, because having a more VRAM locally on the card does, open it up to that competition with the local AI market. So we'll have to see what, if anything, ends up coming from these. But again, videocards.com is citing their own source saying that these cards are physically available at the partners, but that NVIDIA is telling them not to actually move forward. Now, with leaks and rumors, you always have to look at the credibility of the source. While videocards.com reports on all sorts of leaks and rumors of various levels of credibility, generally when they have cited their own sources within AIB manufacturers, their leaks have a pretty good track record. So I would actually rate this pretty highly on my credibility list, but that being said, this is also still leaks and rumors territory, so make of it what you will. Now, other big talking points lately, especially on my channel, my most recent video has covered the availability of monitoring hotspot temperatures on NVIDIA's 50 series cards, where previously reading those hotspot temperatures was not available on 50 series products. Unico's hardware is now reporting that there have been some successful RMA claims, or at least some users have been told by the manufacturer, in this case Colorful, on a 5080 Vulcan to actually send it for RMA. Based on these hotspot temperature readings. Now, these are hotspot temperatures going past 100°C. You don't need to necessarily worry if, the hotspot is kind of high, but if it's like 90-ish or below, like it's not unreasonable to have hotspot temps kind of hot. So one speculation for why NVIDIA may have denied access to these temperatures through their official NV API is that, maybe lots of people get concerned over a temperature that's high but still within spec, and then maybe it, burdens all the RMA claims, et cetera, and things like that. Maybe. There's also some speculation that maybe the temperature readings are not, working properly or something like that, but I don't know, guys. In the end, to me, it seems like these sensors exist. There is now a way to monitor them. They do seem to provide useful information because oftentimes when they are reporting these over 100°C temperatures, we are also seeing tools report thermal throttling, meaning the GPU is limiting its performance due to temperatures, which all adds up to these not being completely useless sensors that are meaningless or not working properly or something like that. And this is useful for the end user to have if they know what they're doing, to look for issues where if you're having problems with your GPU, it's maybe not reaching the performance or clock speeds that you would expect, but NVIDIA's more average GPU temp that it publicly exposes through their official API is showing reasonable temperatures. It's nice to have some way of looking at the hotspot to help you confirm if maybe your cooler is not mounted properly or evenly, or maybe you need a repasting. And as these cards age, the need to repaste and things like that is going to be something that people will start running into more frequently. So I think it's good that we're getting access to these, although again, we don't officially know exactly what's going on with these sensors. These sensors exist, and these tools are now able to uncover and read some data from it. But we don't know exactly what's going on with it. For example, in my video, I talked about Hardware Monitor 1.65, which seemed to be the first publicly available tool that was able to read these temperatures, had two different hotspot temperature readings, and it was unclear which one was the actual GPU hotspot temperature, what the other one was. Was it actually monitoring VRM temps, as I saw some articles and users speculating or thinking that's what it was doing. Now, Hardware Monitor has released a 1.65.1 update, which now removes the second temperature reading and also seems to make some changes to how it's reading the hotspot temperature, and now seems to be a little bit more consistent and put it a little more in line with other tools that have also added support now. So while when I made my video, we only had Hardware Monitor 1.65 as a publicly available tool that could monitor these temperatures. Shortly afterwards, and I posted a community post about this, we got other tools available with those. The next ones were Hardware Info, adding hotspot temperature reporting, and RTSS being able to display it. And then now we have Ada64 also monitoring it, and MSI Afterburner has not officially added support, but the developer asked for maybe the community to get a mod ready that people could use with MSI Afterburner in order to enable reading of these hotspot temperatures. Now, there was some interesting insight, I think, on the MSI Afterburner developer's comment, because he specifically was mentioning that because MSI Afterburner is officially partnered with NVIDIA, they work with them directly, they can't use this method because it is not part of the official NV API to read these hotspot temperatures. So that gives some insight in, there was some speculation over whether NVIDIA had somehow updated its NV API or something that would allow these tools to suddenly be doing this officially from NVIDIA, but that comment from the MSI Afterburner developer seems to make it clear that this is not being officially exposed by NVIDIA. So I think the current thought process on what's happening here is more that the development or somehow the method, like these sensors are available. So somehow there's been some way to now expose access to those temperatures that was not previously available. And I've seen this all came shortly after there being a video from, I'm forgetting the name, some Brazilian YouTube channel, I think, that had access to a I think it's called mods. This is like an internal NVIDIA tool that is not supposed to be publicly available, but some repair shops and things seem to have access to, but didn't seem publicly available. That could read these temps. And then shortly after that video story kind of blew up is when these tools started becoming available. So I don't know if that's just like increased awareness on this, or people were able to, work backwards on how to get that available. I don't know. So it's still definitely not an official thing, but does seem to be useful and does seem to be providing some useful information. And it does look like at least one user has been able to get an RMA based on unusually high hotspot temperature readings off of these types of tools. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Now, other big hardware news that just happened is the official release of the 7700 X3D, which is meant to have a $320 MSRP in the US. However, when it launched, it actually launched available at $280, which I think does make it significantly more exciting. However, it's reaching that price, I guess it was a $330 MSRP. But it's reaching that price with a $50 off promo code at Newegg, and Newegg does seem to be the only retailer selling these. So this does seem to be a Newegg exclusive product, at least for now. But with that $50 off, it certainly increases its value proposition, because the real problem with the 7700 X3D is that the 7800 X3D was frequently available at prices close to that launch price. For example, right now I could get a 7800 X3D for about $350, and occasionally it's been closer to $300 if you kind of monitor the price history. So somebody who is already interested in that type of price to performance ratio for an AM5 build has already kind of had access to it. Remember, the 7700 X3D is essentially just a 10% downclocked 7800 X3D. So it's a binned part that probably just couldn't quite reach 7800 X3D levels of performance. So you kind of already knew what you were getting before the reviews came out or anything like that. But with that extra $50 off, that does make it, I think, a little bit more exciting. And there's also some bundle deals, like a $481 bundle that includes a motherboard and memory, although it's only 16 gigabytes of memory. I mean, in these dark times, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get your build going. But it does feel a little weird to go with a fairly high-end CPU and then pair it with 16 gigabytes of memory. But at the same time, most games do still work okay on 16 gigabytes of memory if you're closing everything else down on the PC while you're doing it. So bundles like that could potentially be interesting. But yeah, you're essentially getting just a slightly downclocked 7800 X3D. Usually is less than a 10% performance gap between the two. And could be, of interest to people based on that. Now, I have seen reports that the overclocking ability of this seems to be software locked. So even if your 7700 X3D may have been capable of reaching 7800 X3D like performance or closing that gap significantly, it seems like they have just hard locked in software, the potential overclock that you could do on this. So that seems to be, a little bit annoying that they would go out of their way to do that and to segment the two products. But anyway, now the other CPU that launched recently from AMD, this one came out a little bit earlier, has been the 5800X3D anniversary release. And it's just been kind of controversial. And this new launch of the 7700X3D also kind of highlights that, in that you're getting significantly more performance CPUs for basically the same price, with the 7700X3D costing less and then the 7800X3D costing about the same. But why the 5800X3D is still of interest is because there's a lot of AM4 platform users who already have memory and a motherboard that are compatible, to where you could upgrade to a 5800X3D without having to buy a new motherboard and especially memory at current memory pricing. So you might be getting a significant upgrade from something like Ryzen 5 3600 or something like that, and not have to buy into the new memory in this memory apocalypse. So it's kind of a weird situation where the 5800X3D in some sense is insultingly priced. It feels like an AMD price gouge because AMD itself offers faster CPUs for the same or less money. But at the same time, if you happen to already own an AM4 motherboard and DDR4 memory, and you're just on an older CPU that's less performant, it's also the best deal for a CPU upgrade. So it's this weird thing where they know they can charge this, so they will, but it feels weird to offer a slower CPU for more money than the 7700X3D. So that one's in kind of a weird place where certain people, the upgrade might make sense despite it feeling like price gouging from AMD. So I both hate the price and understand that some people's best upgrade option is to buy it anyway. Now, in other CPU news, this from Intel, videocards.com is claiming to have some exclusive inside information about the branding of the Intel Core Ultra 400 Nova Lake processors, saying that it's looking like it will, the logo uses Core Ultra Series 4 designation, and that does confirm that Nova Lake S will be launching under the Core Ultra 400 family. They also seem to have embargo date information saying that we'll get the 28-core DS version in Q1 of 2027, probably late January to March, whereas the 28-core K variant will come in Q2, kind of March to April. Then we'll see a 16-core and 8-core versions coming in Q2 of 2027, March to May, and then a 52-core DS version late May to September 2027. So in other words, kind of throughout the first 3 quarters of the year, we'll be seeing products releasing with Intel's Nova Lake series of processors. So hopefully these will be exciting, but it'll be hard to be excited about any kind of processor launch if buying into it would mean buying new memory. So it looks like PC vendors have been looking to secure China's CXMT DRAM supply, but now even CXMT is seeming to have memory orders booked out all the way through 2027, so their supply is kind of selling out here too, so they weren't able to offer enough to solve the RAM apocalypse, although anybody ramping up and building up production is a good thing to somewhat ease the burden. Also, there's been some interesting testing where overclockers have been looking at the performance of CXMT DDR5 memory and saying that apparently at identical speeds, they're seeing less performance compared to Hynix, and with increased batch-to-batch variance in what they're able to do with the overclocking. Now, while that's interesting and of note to, overclockers and people chasing every last bit of performance, I think the vast majority of PC builders are really just hoping prices to come down. So anybody able to put more supply into the market is helping the situation, even if it's not like, a huge amount of help. And it looks like motherboard makers, Asus, MSI, and Colorful have already been looking into performance and official support from CXMT. So progress is moving forward on getting CXMT memory out there and into the PC DIY space. Despite any, slight, performance differences or anything like that compared to the big three suppliers. But yeah, still looks like it's going to be booked out and it's not going to just instantly solve our Rampocalypse or anything like that. Now, speaking of other things being released, the old is new again, that kind of thing. Palit is now also officially bringing back RTX 3060 models. These are 12 gigabyte versions. As another option in the budget segment. But again, it's kind of weird in that you're getting that increased VRAM compared to the current generation budget NVIDIA GPUs that have 8. But the budget GPUs, like even a 5050, can be faster than the 3060 when not VRAM constrained. So I don't know. I wish this was coming in at a lower price, but it comes with 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which comes with certain costs right now. So I have my doubts at how low they can get the pricing. And I think the used market for 3060s, therefore, could be more interesting. However, the 30 series is kind of old at this point, so I would see some people maybe being a little more hesitant to buy into cards that old, etc. But I don't know. Now, Gamers Nexus just put out a video ranting about something that I actually have been experiencing personally and had been considering making my own rant video about. But I'll just mention Gamers Nexus video because if anybody's good at ranting at large companies doing anti-consumer things, Gamers Nexus certainly seems to be the go-to source for that in the PC space. So I use a 4K LG monitor. I think my video descriptions usually contain my components that I'm using here. And I've just been having a good time with it with no weird funny business for well over a year now. I think close to 2 years now. And I don't remember when I bought it, to be honest. But starting sometime recently, within the last few weeks, it seems like, I have also just suddenly been noticing LG Monitor app installer pop-ups on my system, and it's incredibly annoying. And it also just feels just like poorly implemented, like, please control multiple PC with one keyboard and mouse. Like, that English isn't very good. So this seems to have been popping up for a lot of other people, and that's what Gamers Nexus was investigating here. And it's not just on new monitors. People like me who have been using a monitor for years now, suddenly having this spyware pop, well, maybe not spyware, but if you read the terms of service, it certainly seems to be spyware. It's at least adware, because it also advertises crap like McAfee software. And this seems to have been installed through a Windows update where LG is using the Windows just update process to install their software, to install this software, which I was getting by just fine without this, and seeing this poorly translated adware and pretty much spyware as well software just pop up on my PC when I've been using this monitor without this crap for ages is really insulting and frustrating. So yeah, I was about to do my own rant video, but maybe I still will. But then I figured by the time I got to it, it would be coming out right after Gamers Nexus video, and then everybody would think I'm just hopping on the bandwagon or copying him or something. So whatever, he's better at these types of rants than I am anyway. So I'll just vent that here. Because yeah, I have been personally experiencing this frustrating issue. Yeah, it just absolutely sucks. And I'll link all my sources in the video description as usual if you haven't seen the Gamers Nexus piece on this. Now, let's switch to some Steam Machine testing. So this is one of the benchmarks that ETA Prime just ran. Again, sources will be in the video description. I won't show you the other results because I think, when looking at other hardware reviewers' results, I shouldn't show everything. I should give you a reason to click on their video. But it's interesting test of Windows 11 versus SteamOS on the Steam Machine with some benchmarks. Now, there seems to be some variance with SteamOS and Windows winning in various tests, sometimes even within the same game. Overall, I would say it seems to be broadly similar performance. Now, it did seem to be the case that ETA Prime is using a Steam Machine with more RAM installed. Now, I would be interested in running it on the more RAM-constrained version on the actual hardware, because if there's differences in SteamOS's RAM efficiency, that could potentially pop up as an interesting thing. But I thought I'd mention that there is now some comparison of SteamOS versus Windows on the Steam machine, and you might want to look at this video for additional information on that. But like I said, I'd class it as broadly similar performance, nothing major. In the testing that was able to do here. Now, maybe Microsoft is getting scared of Linux potentially eventually developing into more of a competitor, because they've started to do some things to make Windows 11 less bad. No, they've also been doing things that make Windows 11 more bad, and like also seem to be complicit in, allowing LG monitors to install crap on your PC that gives you advertisements and seems to be, without asking for your permission, able to monitor all sorts of things that you're doing on your PC and feed it back to LG for their own profit. So not everything Microsoft is doing is good. However, they do seem to be removing promotional content from Windows search. So trying to make Windows search less terrible. So from their official Windows blog, they're saying promotional content has been removed from web results. Web results show the most relevant answer instead of first showing related products and promotions, helping search feel more focused and less distracting. And here's their example. So, hey, making it less bad. Why it was bad in the first place is a whole other problem. But I guess I should celebrate things being less bad than they were. But it's still kind of frustrating how bad they were in the first place and how bad many things still are. But there's that. Now on, Steam machine or Steam related situations, Valve says that iFixit will keep selling Steam Deck batteries after all. There had recently been a round of reporting, I don't think I had covered it on my channel, that iFixit had mentioned that they were kind of on their last batch of original Steam Deck LCD batteries and weren't able to source more. But it looks like Valve did get them a shipment, so iFixit will still be able to keep selling those Steam Deck LCD batteries. So that's good, and shows that Valve is committed to trying to get good support long-term for their hardware products and all of that. Now, also in the news lately has been all the massive Xbox layoffs, and I've covered that quite a bit on the channel, so I thought I'd also cover that it's being reported that these layoffs could potentially be a bigger issue for the industry than just the actual layoffs, because many games are developed with contractors being a huge part of the development rather than just the official employees. So when these projects get canceled, you're also losing a bunch of work for contractors, not just the direct layoffs. And this can potentially be a bigger issue where some of the people who worked on these projects may not even be able to put it on their resume when they look for their next job and things like that if they were under NDAs and things like that. So that's just another hidden level of this being potentially worse for game developers than already reported on. Now, also, there's been a lot of discussion over which games are being prioritized, what's being worked on by these Microsoft-owned studios, Bethesda Game Studios being one of the biggest ones here. Now, Bethesda has given a big update here discussing what they're working on, what they're prioritizing, all of that. All my sources, again, will be in the video description if you want to read through the whole thing. But basically, they're mentioning that Starfield has had over 17 million players now, and they continue to develop content for Starfield. And they're also talking about Fallout being one of their biggest priorities. Fallout 5 is still a long-range target, so we're probably pretty far out from a Fallout 5. However, they do have a bunch of active development going on Fallout projects, not just Fallout 76, but it looks like they're looking for a... well, they've already been working on Fallout 3 and New Vegas remasters. So those are incoming. And then there's also collaboration discussions with the Obsidian working on Fallout, etc. They talk a bit about Elder Scrolls, saying that they are working on Elder Scrolls 6. I think that they're explicitly stating that they're still using Creation Engine technology, although Creation Engine 3 is going to be shared technology for Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5. So there can be some simultaneous work going on those projects. And it looks like that Creation Engine 3 is a development of the technology that has been ongoing since Starfield's launch. So basically, none of this is super surprising. There's a bunch of Fallout stuff incoming, including those remasters of Fallout 3 and New Vegas, probably coming sooner, and then Fallout 5 probably taking more years to actually get out the door. And they are confirming the work with Obsidian on some kind of new Fallout-related content. And just confirming Elder Scrolls 6 is moving along and all of that. So no huge surprises there. Now, in big game news, there's GTA 6 coming soon, and it's in the PC news that we are not going to be getting that PC version at launch. So we have a ex-Rockstar producer talking a bit about that and how they've done that on previous projects and why these things happen, etc., why they target console first and then target PC later after some number of months or years. His take on it is that they've got an ecosystem, they've got hardware, that they know exactly what the specs are, they know what the thermal limits of the unit are, and they can dedicate all their resources to it. They don't have to worry about, oh, what if this person has a graphics card that is 10 years old? So basically the idea that if they just focus on that fixed piece of hardware, development can be a little more focused and potentially you're getting the game sooner if they can just focus on that. And they also talk about the fact that if they had led with maybe PC as a big part of the target for development, that then consoles would maybe have to shrink when they actually were looking at optimizing for console, whereas they view it as easier to extend what the consoles can do. So if what the consoles can do is your primary focus, and then you start worrying about a PC version, the PC version can worry about extending what the consoles can do, saying that shrinking is a lot harder than extending. It's way harder to make your game performant than it is to just be like, oh, we've got extra room, cool, we can turn up the shadows, we can render things further out, but when you have to render things closer, that means you have to write code to actively stop rendering things earlier, or you have to decimate meshes, it's a lot of manual work. Anyway, so basically that's at least this ex-Rockstar producer's take on it, is that if they just laser focus on the console versions with that less hardware variations, etc., they can focus on doing the best they can on that, probably get it faster out the door, and then the PC version can come later and look at extending what the consoles are able to do, as well as maybe putting work into having to think about the older hardware support, etc. Now, for those of you wondering, okay, so can I just emulate GTA 6 on my PC? Well, there has been a lot of progress being made on PS5 emulators, but I would have my doubts whether any of them will be in a state to give you GTA 6 running on PC through emulation at launch. It looks like two major PS5 emulation products recently became community-driven. That I don't know if you're supposed. I've just read this in text. I don't know how to actually say this out loud. Would it be Kitty? PS5 and Sharp Emu are both now community-driven with code being published. So that's interesting, and perhaps that could speed up development. So never say something's impossible to get GTA 6 running, if not by launch, maybe before we get an official PC version, depending on how long it takes to get an official PC version. Who knows? Looks like there's been developments like Sony's Astro Bot, which is a PlayStation exclusive with no PC version, at least gets to an early boot stage on PC now through Sharp Emu or Emu. Again, I read these with text, not sure how you're supposed to pronounce them. But that's certainly a far cry from it being able to actually run and play the game well. So there's that. And since we're talking about emulators, RPC S3 is now saying that 75% of the PlayStation 3 games are now at least playable on PC. And RPCS 3 has moved closer to running PS3 games without any Sony firmware. Looks like they now have Cell Sys module up and running without having to use PlayStation's version of that. So that's interesting. And since we're talking about PlayStation, I could mention that the God of War TV series has had a major problem as the Kratos actor is having to be recast after already filming 4 episodes. So they're going to have to reshoot probably the majority of those 4 episodes, because you would imagine that any scene, at least with a close-up on the Kratos character, which you would imagine would be most of the episodes, are going to have to be reshot after recasting, because the original actor, Hurst, has had an onset injury that looked like it would be months of recovery time. So yikes. Anyway, all right, that's the PC hardware news I've got for you today. Hopefully you found it useful and or interesting. As usual, all sources will be in the video description, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Hope all of you have an excellent day.